everybody. Welcome to Baphoment's Lounge. I'm your host, the incomparable NSS. Cheers. Yes. Well, in today's episode, we're going to go back to my series called Gone But Not Forgotten. We're going to feature a lovely young lady, a pint-sized young lady with a large voice by the name of Ruby Starr. Ruby Starr was born in 1949, November 30th, 1949, as Constance Henrietta Merzwiak, I'm assuming. And she was from Toledo, Ohio, and started out playing in a lot of little bands. Was versus Connie Little. Then she became Ruby Jones, I believe. And then she got discovered by Jim Dandy from Black Oak, Arkansas. And that was, unfortunately, her claim to fame. She was that voice you hear on their all-time largest hit single, Jim Dandy to the Rescue, the one going, "He's mine, Jim Dandy." Ruby was a lot more than just that. She had, like I say, a powerful voice, balls to the wall, always fascinated by her. And unfortunately, after that, she did put out 3 albums on Capitol Records and then kind of just continued the circuit, played in Vegas for a bit. It wasn't until the 90s when she got lung cancer, diagnosed with lung cancer and a brain tumor, and died at the tender age of 45 back in Toledo. Well, I hooked up with a wonderful gentleman by the name of Timex Saba, who has licensed and released her 3 albums plus a live album from 75 from Capitol Records. And I immediately purchased them because as a collector, I want them in my collection. But Timexx was so generous in giving an interview to me to kind of allow me to tell you guys more about Ruby and why he's doing it. And he's got some great, fascinating stories. He's a great guy. So without further ado, let me turn this over to Mr. Timex Saba, and I'll see you on the other side.
Hi, everybody. It's the Comparable NSS here. With me today, I have Mr. Timex Saba. He has been working on the releasing and restoring of the Ruby Starr and Grey Ghost catalog. So, for starters, Timexx, tell me about your involvement in the entertainment industry and what you've done in the past and what you're currently doing now.
I was pretty much born into the music industry. My dad was a promoter in the old days. He used to work with a lot of the Hee Haw guys, Dave Dudley. He would do donkey softball games or gospel concerts, just kind of whatever would come through the area at the time. So I was really young and just kind of involved in that. My family is from Black Oak. My mom's related to Jim Dandy. So I always had them sort of around me. It was years before I actually realized they were rock stars. They were just, the guys from the family.
Wow.
So we lived in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is a little just up the road. We're about 2 hours north of there. We're sort of halfway between St. Louis and Memphis. It's a really musical area. There's a lot of, blues and rock and country. And so there was always a lot of music in the area. So which is something I was kind of just raised in and always just enjoyed doing. I recorded my first album when I was about 15 years old and did a hard rock album with a band called Stage Crew back in, I want to say like 85, 84, or 87, somewhere around the late 80s. I was a teenager. That was my first experience. We got out and did that. And then through the 90s, played with a band called Driving Rain. We did a lot of opening acts. We played for all the lots of festivals. We were that 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock band at the festival. That later in the night, everybody goes, "Hey, that band was pretty good." Who was that? I don't know. That was us. So we did those kind of shows all over the place. We would travel around with bands. We'd be touring with LA Guns. They'd have the bus. We'd be in the van tagging along, and we would hope that we would have rooms and build time on the show. But we had a lot of fun doing that. And so we did Driving Rain for a long time. We released various albums with that band and got to kind of noticed from the Midwest area, but our problem turned into basically being geographical when we would talk to record people and they would say, "Oh, where are you from?" And we would say, "Cape Girardeau, Missouri." I could hear the air as they went to slam the phone down on me.
Ugh.
So it was like they would just go for a band out on one of the coast, and we just did our thing. We had a good following in this area with the biker community and the rocking crowd, and if a band was coming through the area, Hollywood All-Stars were coming, they would call us and go, hey, man, we need 3 or 4 shows somewhere in the Midwest, and we could hook them up. And so we did a lot of that stuff, and it was a lot of fun.
You forgot to mention about your time with Herman the German.
Man, right, I did. That was right around the time Driving Rain was on a kind of a hiatus. We had lost our guitar player, and so a good friend of mine from a band called Strike Force out of St. Louis, Duke Jackson, gave me a call, said, hey, I'm going to be doing these shows with Herman. Herman heard your recording. He loves your voice. Do you want to come do it? I was like, well, absolutely. So Herman flew in. We did some practices. I was really nervous about it at the beginning because I was thinking, like, okay, do I do the Klaus accent? How do I pull this off? And Herman says, you know what? You're not Klaus. We're not the Scorpions. Just sing it the way you want. Have fun with it. So I just belted it out the way that I had always done it. I kind of just turned around, forgot that Herman was there, and I just sung Blackout like I'd always done every other time in the rest of my life. And he loved it. He said, man, it's great. I love your voice. And he's like, you're just like an energy about to explode all the time. And he liked that excitement. And so we went out to Rocklahoma, probably one of the hottest shows I'd ever done in my life. Nice. It was literally like playing in an oven. We were in this tent, and they dropped the curtains on the side so people couldn't see in the tent, and it made it even hotter. But it was fun. I got a message at one point from Klaus. He heard a version of me screaming another piece of meat, and he said that he liked it, that the way that I put the metal scream to it. He liked that. And that was really meant a lot to me. And so over the years, starting in the 80s, I started doing work with Black Oak, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, making posters, making phone calls, whatever little things they would need, I would do. Jim would sometimes call. I got really close to Ricky over the years, and me and Ricky started working really well together. Ricky was just anyone that knew him was instantly a friend. He was such a great guy. And so we kind of built this friendship over the years of me helping them with shows. Sometimes they would be at a radio station doing an interview, and Ricky would send me a message, hey, could you send the station an MP3 real fast? And I could ship out something, send it real fast. We was real good with all that kind of thing. I was the first one to help them get on Facebook at the time. They didn't know anything about MySpace or any of that, so I helped them get that and explain to them what it was, and it was a lot of fun working with those guys, and also doing opening acts with my own band. We would show up and we'd play shows with them, and I learned a lot working with that group, which is kind of what led me into doing the Ruby Starr stuff. Ricky Lee had called me one day and he says, hey, Timexx, I found these cassette tapes in this box of these old Ruby songs. What should we do? I was like, we should immediately release them, dude. Get them out, and so he contacted all the guys in the band and all the band members, the people who had recorded those tracks, and they were all like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Let's get it out. Unfortunately, then before we could really get the ball rolling, Ricky passed. And
horribly, yes.
He had released his own sort of version of it, which the idea was he could sell those. We tried to make some money from that to try to fund the rest of the catalog, to try to kickstart things to kind of keep it going. So then I kind of struggled with it for a little bit of what should I do? Should I continue with what we had started? I really felt like that's what Ricky was wanting me to do. And so I contacted some of the guys from Grey Ghost, asked them what they wanted, and they were like, 45 years ago, yeah, let's do what you need, put it out. So then contacted other people involved, and everyone was just really in love with the idea of kind of reintroducing the world to Ruby Starr. She was very influential, and people don't even sometimes realize how influential she was. And unfortunately, with the music business, if you don't keep that memory alive, the next generations we'll just forget about them.
Yes, I wanted to point out something there that, Ruby, regrettably, is the voice of "He's My Jim Dandy" on the Black Oak, Arkansas's largest single. And unfortunately, that's the only thing she's really known for. But she was an independent solo artist. She'd been playing since she was a 15-year-old kid like yourself, until her untimely passing in her 40s from a brain tumor, I believe, or something like that. And it's great that you can get those albums finally to hear what she put out during that time. She was influential. She was a Spitfire. She was looks like she must have been like 4'2", right. With a voice loud as a lion's,
She was, and she was really, there's a really great story there if people find out about. I mean, she was just this little girl singing with the big bands in Toledo, Ohio. And she, she had that voice where she could oversing the horn section. So she was just blasting there's this little girl. And then so she kind of changed her name, became Connie Little, and released some albums, some 45s in the Toledo area. Eventually, though, she moves up to doing full-length albums, which she does this really cool, funky soul album with as Ruby Jones. Eventually moves on to being Ruby Starr. She kind of changed her name as she went along, which might be caused a little confusion as well, but it really helped timestamp those moments in her life when her sound would sort of change in those moments when she would do something even bigger, more spectacular. All of that stuff, her whole story is so amazing to have come from where just this little girl singing big band in Toledo to where she's opening for Black Sabbath and she's touring in the world and she's on the Midnight Special. And I see acts today that a lot of these female rock singers that just are amazing and rock, and it totally inspired by Ruby Starr, even if they don't know it. That whole thing kind of came from her being that and pushing those boundaries that, yeah, a girl can stand on stage and a girl can rock. They're not just going to have to stand up there and sing, old standard love songs. They can rock. And she would come out and hold her own with all the boy bands.
She really did. I have to say that it's amazing that voice she was power. She was straight
Right.
power. How did you go about licensing the albums from her official collection?
She was signed to Cabal.
Cabal. How did you get the masters for that to release those?
We can a little because some of the I don't actually have the masters, and the issue with some of that turned out that there was a big fire at Universal, and a lot of the masters were lost. Some of the masters are just damaged or were completely burnt and completely lost. And I was told that these masters were involved in that fire. So I've not been able to get any farther details from that.
So you went to the album masters then?
The original recordings are probably all lost in the Universal fire, was what I was told. Because her catalog wasn't super popular and didn't sell a lot, they weren't really interested in going to look for them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so she's where they stored the Ark of the Covenant, and that
right.
Big thing.
It was a thing. Well, they didn't know if they had it. They weren't sure if they had it. It was probably in the fire. It's involved in a lot in the insurance settlement. They don't know what they could use, what they can't use. But I got permission to do what I wanted, anyways. As the version that we're doing is just a remaster and a reissue. If at some point they would find the masters who wanted to do it. Obviously, Cabal would just do what they want and release their own big, super gigantic version of it.
Yeah,
just all totally on them. But that's kind of how that all fell down. I got the rights to do what we wanted on a small level because obviously I'm not Capitol Records, so I'm not going to be selling millions of copies. And if I can get some interest in her again and get people recognizing her and get that music known and get some exposure to her, that would cause some of the bigger people to be more involved and more interested in jumping onto the project. It's kind of like, go for it, kid. If you get some interest, we'll come back. If you don't get any interest, then you're on your own. So
you know what? I'm gonna thank you for that. As a music lover, and I'm a recording engineer and a musician myself, like you. As a music lover, I've got 3,600 CDs because I support that, and that's what it's about. And a lot of CDs in my collection are of that one guy who recorded an album and disappeared, or this or that or whatever. There's an artist called Connie Converse that all of a sudden people are calling she's Dylan before Dylan. She's this girl that recorded some stuff and then in 1970 disappeared, never heard from again. And thanks to whatever, we have her recorded work. And thanks to you, you're giving the other Connie, our Ruby Starr, a second chance at hey, check this out, and I think that's wonderful.
And her songs are really great. The lyrics are deep. I mean, people talk about Taylor Swift writing songs of her boyfriends and lovers and stuff. Ruby was doing that way before. If you read some of those lyrics, her lyrics are very pointed at her life and people that was involved in what's going on. And it's amazing that those songs are just sitting there. And like you, I don't want people to forget them. I don't want people to forget the guys in the band. Those guys were amazing talents that people, they were a big part of that scene, but without keeping that music alive and without telling the next generations, there's a good chance they will just forget them. And so they become albums that you buy at a dollar bin of someone you've never heard, and they deserve way more than that. I had a problem too with being that female. She was sort of overran by men in the industry at the time who who just didn't exactly know. They're like, she's a pretty face, put a record out. She was much more than that. And it's just a sign of the time, I suppose.
The first album is definitely, blues soaked. But Scene Stealer, the second one, there's some interesting stuff. There's one track on there called Mass Transit that's a kind of a jazzy type thing where the band spreads its wings for a bit. There is some stuff, they got, I'm assuming that Smoky Places, which I've yet to get, is going to be a little bit more, they try to get here in a more commercial vibe or whatever like that. Had you ever met Ruby in your travels?
I met Ruby briefly when I was a teenager, really starting in my career. Her and Gray Star, with the band she was in, was playing at one of our local venues down the road. I, being a teenager at the time, was way too intimidated to really actually talk to her. I briefly said hello, and I kind of hung out with the rest of the guys in the band and just admired her from afar. But yeah, that was the one chance. I wished I would have known more at that time about who she was, what was going on. But I was a teenager. I was still just discovering that Ozzy was in Black Sabbath. It was early in my learning career, but my dad was in a biker club, and they would go to the bars all the time. And so I would get into those places really young back then. I ended up talking to Mike Starr a lot that night, Mike Gray, who eventually became Chainsaw Kane from Slave Raider after he left Gray Star.
Get out! I remember those guys. Slave Raider.
Yeah.
They were a blip on the map.
You, me, and the boys got to make some big noise.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, they were. And Slave Raider was kind of influential on their own. They kind of had that look that Prince had kind of copied on with his band for the Revolution for Purple Rain. Mike's band had that a little earlier, that kind of the hair flipped over, the makeup across the eyes, the long jackets. Rumor is that Prince had seen Slave Raider at a venue there in Minneapolis and liked that look and just said, well, okay, we're going to dress the Revolution that way. And so, yeah, a lot of people don't even realize that's the same guy. And he was the co-singer in Slave Raider, in Gray Star. One of the things I was going to talk about, you mentioned earlier, was Mass Transit being such an interesting song. I thought that was interesting, and I found out, I talked to Dave Mayo, kind of how that developed, I believe, is that Dave was also in a band. Yeah, he was in a band with Steve Cropper called Wash Rag, and they were sort of a funky instrumental band that played a lot of stuff like Mass Transit. So that Wash Rag album with Dave Mayo, who was Ruby Starr's bass player, I kind of think is that influence kind of flew over into that. And it probably gave her a second end of set to do a close change,
Right. Well, it's good. And it let the guys in the band sort of, get their wings out. There's so much to talk about. And I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with me and to be on Baphomet's Lounge. I consider myself a music historian. I want to personally thank you for what you're doing to, release this stuff. And I'm again, it's very important to me to grab. I bought I got the Live in 75, the first album, Scene Stealer, and I just ordered Smoky Places from you, because I want it for my collection. I want to listen to it and enjoy it. And
I appreciate it. And yeah, there's a group of us involved in it. I handle a lot of the production type end of it and some of the artwork, but there's a lot of people that are involved in getting these Ruby things out. Becca Williams is really highly involved with the production end and the sales end of it, and she's done a lot on her own as well. We've got some advice from Butch Stone, who was the original manager and producer on the album, as far as directions, what we can and can't do and what we should do, and he's always been very helpful for me.
Excellent.
I'm
friends with Butch and his daughter Jenny. I'm very good friends with. So
they're both very cool. Butch gets a hard rap sometimes from the Black Oak community, and I personally kind of see that as unfounded a little bit. Butch was a big part of that group, and a lot of the things that they did, from going from being a Southern band from Memphis and Black Oak, Arkansas, to touring the world, involved a lot of the things that he helped them do. And if they hadn't have had that perfect combination of people to make that work. And then anyone who has worked with a rock band, myself included, knows it's not the easiest thing to do. You've got 5 or 6 guys with all different personalities, all doing different drugs, all hanging out with different people, all studying different religions, and you've got to bring them all together to make them stay together long enough to be on stage. There's a book that I love that I read about. It was from a old big band leader he wrote a book about being a big band leader in the 30s, and he said that the hardest part of being a band leader is dealing with the musicians. He said he always felt envious of the zookeeper, because the zookeeper only had to deal with animals and they stayed in cages.
Well, you know,
So,
I have a library. I have probably the largest library of entertainment industry. I have memoirs. I have stuff, and that's kind of how I connected with Jenny, because and I, as a CD collector, there's a great record label out of Britain called Rock Candy Records, and I grabbed the band called
great stuff.
Cobra. Great.
Oh, yeah.
I got Cobra, and they were mentioning Butch in there and how he was their manager. So I reached out to Jenny and I said, let me read you what they write. And she's telling, and it was, again, I'm this huge, you know, historian. I've got a huge library on entertainment, and all I got to say on everything and anything is there's always more than one side to any story.
Absolutely.
And yes, there have been, you know, there's the shady artists, there's the shady managers, there's the shady record label people. There's all these different stories and things happen, whatever. I think the greatest thing that ever happened to me was that all 4 members of KISS have released the book. And it's amazing how the story is like, even like Kiss Alive. Gene's like, oh, we never overdubbed it. We just did that. And then Ace, Ace says, well, we overdubbed a lot of stuff. Bill says, yeah, we overdubbed stuff. And Peter goes, oh, we did. We kept, it was overdubbed, but my drums were there. I'm like, okay, one album, 4 different opinions as to what happened. Okay.
They emphasize that. You see that a lot in the Dirt. If you read the Dirt story, where they will tell the same story. You'll have all 4 band members, a roadie, and one of their managers all tell the same story, completely different. From their own versions.
Right.
And I talked to Butch a lot of things, and he's been really great, and I do appreciate him, and I think he gets a bad rap, and people should give him a little bit more credit for what he was able to do for that band and that family. And I know I've talked to some of the other band members, and they're all in old age now. They've all looked back and see things that are going on and how things went down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you needed. There's always been, and this is the age-old question. I've got a great book written by the guy that was the Queen's original manager, and he formed Trident Studios. And you know, Death on Two Legs was about him. He makes a compelling argument to the fact that I financed that band, I did this, I paid for it, I was in the hole, I was, you know, blah 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 blah. So Kiss did the same thing with Bill Coyne. I mean, the guy put the entire tour on his Amex card, and then later on when they parted ways with him, they felt that, you know, you're right. There's always this little line that you wonder, like, okay, well, they invested here, now they're collecting. How often do they get to collect, or how much do they invest? You know, and it never, like you said, you got drugs involved, you got different religions involved, you got different stories involved, different personalities involved. Somewhere in there is the truth. For me, it's not to judge. It is what's more important to me is the release of the information. For that, I definitely, thank you for that. And I'm glad that you are able to get to the sources, whether it's Butch, whether it's the bass player friend of yours or whatever. At least you can build something together to release it properly. So
yeah,
that's excellent. Any parting words, Timexx, that you wanted to say to encourage the people that are watching this about Ruby? Go ahead, please.
I would just enjoy things. You know, she left a lot of music there for us. Find the music that you like and listen to what she's done, and whatever it is that makes you happy, have some fun with that. Don't get stressed out about all the crazy things in the world. Crank up some music, kick back, blow off a little bit, and just have some fun with the music, and let music take you where it's going to go, and enjoy your life a little bit.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out. I really appreciate it, and I hope this isn't the last time we get to talk.
I hope so too. Yeah, I've got a new release coming out soon. I'm in Dr. Fever and the Venus Flytrap, the disco funk band I was telling you about, and we're going to be opening for the Ozark Mountain Daredevils August 5th at a big arena here in Missouri, and so we're putting out a new single, a funky groove single called "Let Me Get My Groove On." We're hoping to have that out by August, and I'll make sure I send you one.
Outstanding. That'll be great. Thank you, Timexx.
Thanks so much. Had a great time.
Well, there you have it, folks. That was Mr. Timex Saba telling us all about the late, great Ruby Starr and her band Gray Ghost. I have links down in the contents below of where you can get your copy of those Ruby Starr CDs, LP, and even a DVD. And, of course, if you like what you see, feel free to click and subscribe, because, it helps the YouTube algorithm, so that way I become huge star and a major influencer. And then I could tell you to buy the Ruby Starr stuff. And you'll do it because you'll be programmed by my influencer greatness, I think. But if you do want to buy that stuff, links down below. And of course, if you like merchandise, I've got pint glasses, I have got koozies, I have got all sorts of little knickknacks, links below, all handled by my my group at Chautauqua Audio Works. So that's about it for now. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for enjoying this episode. I'll see you soon. Peace, everybody.